John Cage, Songbooks, consists of a volume, this is the first volume of it, which is basically a kind of kit from which you, the performer, can come up with songs, speeches, actions, performances on other instruments, which all add up together to create a musical evening. So it's a study in creativity for everyone involved in it. Each person is preparing his or her solos around texts, very often of Henry David Thoreau, Eric Satie, Marcel Duchamp, and Cage himself. And then we all get together and start to perform these pieces simultaneously with others doing their pieces.
He really wanted musicians to dedicate themselves to the task, to look at the instructions and to decide, well, what does that mean to me? And how can I use what I know, how can I use my expertise to really fulfill this in a creative way?
I mean, look at this score, for instance. Look at this page. Now, the font size will determine the emphasis that should be put on the words. I can sing any pitch that I choose, but it needs to, this page needs to last 52 seconds. The same text on the next page with a different font size for the words, for certain words, will need to last 53 seconds. And one begins this particular song, which is song number 43, with it going rather fast, with 17 seconds. And sometimes I go through this and I get spot on 17 seconds. And sometimes I think I'm spot on and it was 25 seconds. So, but Joan has taught me not to get too crazy.
Yeah. You do your best. You look at the watch and say,
best. Whoops. Oh, well, that's no longer. I hope you don't mind, Auntie.
This book has lots of different kinds of notation, some of it numerical, some of it just notes and words appearing in an open space, some of it entirely squiggles, some of it numbered choices where you can pick one from here and then one from here and one from here and one from here. So it's different levels of organization in the music.
and there's actually a lot of information when you look at
Yes,
this. You know,
yes.
you not only have these very heavy lines that could potentially be the vocal line, but you've also got all of this noise. So if you take a little detour off the main road, you might have the opportunity to actually make some noise if you're fulfilling that particular thing. Or if you're looking at dear Mr. Thoreau here, and you're supposed to be singing his beard. You know, what do you do with that? You know, there are ways of, you've got a thick texture here, you've got a little stubble over here, you know, you've got these kind of wavy lines here. So it's information.
Yes.
You know, you use that as musical information, and you use your intelligence to deal with that then as a score. And there are probably all sorts of instructions about how much time you spend, what you do with it, whether it's modified electronically, and it's a marvelous challenge.
Yes, it is.
I think, to put it together and figure out what to do with it.
But the parts from which we play are very suggestive of different kinds of activities. Some of them ask us to make a list of actions which we might consider doing on stage, like breathing, coughing, entering, exiting, and, well, it's a lot to your imagination.
There are individual solos that are theater pieces, for example, where you can play a chess game, or play a game of dominoes, or write a note on an amplified table.
I mean, there's one song that consists of playing a game of solitaire. That's the song. And I love the idea that there are these instructions and one must read them very carefully because he meant them. They're not just kind of arbitrary. And for me, doing this music, it is just so much fun to sort of put it together, saying, well, I can make this decision, but then I have to justify by looking to see if he's written this anywhere, because I can't just sort of make it up as I go along.
You know, this is really the joy of putting it together. It's this discovery
Yes.
that we go through.
Yes.
Taking a look at this and seeing what the task is, bringing all of our equipment
Yes, exactly.
to bear on this particular task, and then thinking of the multifarious ways any particular piece could be done, and trying out a number of different ways, and then coming up with your decision.
Of course.
So it's fascinating.
And while all this is going on, there are instrumentalists who are likewise playing from charts which indicate somewhat when they play and perhaps what register in which they play, but gives them a lot of freedom as to the actual notes that they play, on which instruments they're going to play. And on even another level, there is a sound designer who is connected to lots of the singers and the performers via microphones of various kinds. And the sounds are being processed during the course of the performance in a way, as is a lot of this, determined by a particular order which evolves just before the performance starts. So all these individual elements that have been really sensitively prepared go into the mix in a way that will be different at every performance.
And what's actually fascinating about it is how all of these things can take place simultaneously and maybe be in different keys, if they're in any key at all.
Yes.
But they all work.
Yes, and the layering is the interesting part of it.
Yeah,
and therefore being focused on what you're doing is extremely important, because rather than sort of saying, oh, I'll sing this differently because Joan is doing something differently, that shouldn't happen, because then it just falls into, I think, sort of disruption. And I'm really sort of understanding that, about being absolutely focused on what you're doing, so that the things that are happening around you and with you at the same time we all sort of complement sort of one another, and we're not sort of trying to see, well, maybe I better change it now. And I think that is really something I just can't wait until we're all sort of doing it together, and the audio person is doing what they have to do, and I hear what happens when my voice is changed electronically and all of that. It's just going to be just very fascinating. Just laughing. But I just think it's just going to be so much fun. I can hardly wait for it.
It's a very special opportunity to hear Cage songbooks done by such an interesting group of artists. And I think this will be one of the more ambitious productions of this piece ever done. A lot of very careful care and attention is going into this so that we all can make really interesting choices.